Hello everybody, this is TechHut. In this video, what we're going to be doing is talking about Firefox, specifically their parent company, Mozilla. If you watched any of my videos, you probably know that Firefox generally is my web browser of choice. I've been using it for a good number of years. And there's some good reason for that. We're going to be talking about that in this video, but we're also going to be covering some of the controversial decision making that Mozilla has made in the past, and even with that, why Mozilla is absolutely essential for the open source community, and overall one of the very few actual positive forces in the desktop web browser market space. But before we get too far into this topic, I have to thank the sponsor of this video, Grid Studio. Right here I have two of their products. What these are beautiful shadow box displays that feature tore down hardware. I mean, if you're at all into tech or a tech enthusiast, these are some super cool things to go ahead and throw on your wall. I've had one back there for quite a while. That one's the iPhone 5. We've got the iPhone 4S here and the old school classic Game Boy right here. This one is my new favorite display. Looking at their product page, they have a whole bunch of different options and shadow boxes that you could go ahead and grab. If there's some old device or something that used to have that just was your favorite, it is awesome to be able to display it on your wall like this. And it's really cool because it's kind of an educational piece too, because every single component of these various devices have labels, so you can identify what everything is real easy. For example, on the 4S there, we could see the main board, rear camera, just all the different components. Super cool. Over time, hopefully I deck out my office in them. And down below, there'll be a coupon code or something to go ahead and save yourself a little bit of money. Before we cover any of the Firefox drama, let's first talk about why Firefox needs to succeed. You probably know this. If you look at the current desktop web browser market space, Google Chrome makes up about 70% or so. That is 70% of the market share being controlled by a company that makes a vast majority of their money off of user data and advertising. And that company has a really strong incentive to get as much control of just web standards as possible to further increase those profits. This 70% number gets even worse when you include other Chromium-based web browsers like Brave or even Microsoft Edge. If you count all Chromium-based browsers, that's well over 80% of the total market share on the desktop. And these numbers get even worse when you start to include mobile devices like this. Considering iPhones, Safari takes up about 25% of the mobile web browser market share. But if you take iPhones out of the equation and you focus purely on Android-based devices, Firefox is the only web browser that I'm aware of that doesn't use the Chromium engine, and it only has a 0.5% market share. So essentially, Firefox is our last hope when it comes to web browsers that don't have a Chromium base, unless if you're using an Apple device. Now, there are other independent web browsers, but when it comes to market share, those are so low, they don't really even have a fighting chance to get numbers, let alone Firefox, even if they do at this point, considering some of the hot water that they've been getting into, which has caused them to lose ground fast in their hold in the market. One huge problem with Firefox is it brands itself on being privacy friendly and not collecting any of your data. The problem is that is not entirely true. For example, Firefox pings Google for safe browsing to make sure that the website you're trying to visit is safe, and it also pings Google for your geolocation, which is kind of silly because Mozilla has its very own geolocation service that it doesn't even use within Firefox. On top of that, Firefox also has a feature called Firefox Suggests, where it can suggest websites while you're typing the URL, and this will send basically every keystroke you type to Mozilla. Another recent, not as important, but still an issue, is the overall redesign of Firefox was not very well received by people. In fact, people hated it so much that they were creating memes about it. Yes, this redesign is the logo that sparked the oversimplified logo meme that was popular in February of 2021. However, unsurprisingly, this didn't really make too much of a difference in their market share, with a drop of about 0.2% after the redesign was added and 0.5% about a month later. However, this redesign was an overblown issue for Firefox. The issue that should be talked about most is where Mozilla makes a vast majority of their money, which is from their biggest competitor, Google. Firefox using Google's geolocation services? It's in the contract. Despite layoffs in 2020, they've actually had some decent revenue growth, even though with that about 85% of all of their revenue comes from Google being the default search engine within Firefox, which really isn't good because considering that most of the things Mozilla stands against is how Google makes a profit. Another way Firefox makes money is through Pocket. However, Pocket for users is kind of annoying because it fills up new tab pages with a bunch of recommended articles you probably don't care about, and of course, sponsored posts. You can disable this out of the box, but it just kind of makes Firefox feel like your typical Microsoft Edge or some other browser with silly features that you didn't add yourself than how you would assume a completely free and open source web browser should be. Back to the main issue, and that is the Google partnership. This is just seems like a conflict of interest to me when it comes to their morals and principles of the company. It's those principles that makes me dream of the day that Firefox regains market share, similar to how it performed in like the late 2000s. These principles are listed on the Mozilla Manifesto, and they mostly go through how the internet is now an integral part of life and how the internet needs to remain open and accessible to anybody. And things like security and privacy are a right and shouldn't be treated as just something that is optional. Even with the issues that we've gone through, Firefox is still a great browser and has a ton of good features. For example, they have a lot of privacy features that are just disabled by default. It currently has total cookie protection, which isolates cookies into specific websites to prevent cross-site tracking. On top of that, they do collect a teeny amount of data, but they don't sell your data at all, and it's used purely to improve Firefox, except for the data, of course, that is pinged to Google. A lot of the modern features that make it better than every other browser, including account syncing, picture-in-picture modes, Pocket for saving articles if you don't mind the ads on the homepage and you actually want to use it, several customization features, and even a built-in screenshot utility that I use frequently in my videos. Now, another awesome feature that people don't really talk about too much is multi-account containers. This is an extension that you can download by Mozilla that allows you to isolate websites. And this is great if you will use websites that you have multiple accounts for. And you can use these containers to isolate specific tasks. For example, one thing that some shopping sites do is change prices depending on the information that they have about you in order to make the most amount of money possible. Well, you can use these isolated browser instances to prevent tracking, thus preventing that from even happening at all. Firefox even has another separate extension to specifically containerize Facebook so you can prevent Facebook from collecting any data connected to you outside of that specific Facebook container. Something that I didn't know about until reviewing this script that I'm definitely going to be taking advantage of. But the main benefit to Firefox right now is you're not necessarily contributing to Google's monopoly on the internet. This is the one few ways to not do that. Firefox still has a strong enough user base that Google thinks it's worth giving them a huge sum of money every year to maintain their contract and the moderate interconnectedness of the services. And I do understand why they have to do this. It is difficult to make the amount of money that they need to from the open source community, especially when it's a free project or a free product. And even in this video, my overall attitude towards one of the ways that they make money, Pocket, isn't positive. It's just something I don't like personally, but it's even that attitude that I hold myself that is not beneficial to Firefox as a whole. And I do kind of wish that they would be able to experiment with other ways to make money, but with the current Google contract, it's very difficult to do. An example of another company that's done this is Brave. It's a Chromium-based web browser, but they don't have those contracts with Google, so they were able to make their own complete search engine. And I don't know the specifics of the Google Firefox agreement, but it's probably in there somewhere that Firefox cannot just build a competing product like that. And with the amount of market share Firefox has right now, it's not always a guarantee that web developers will gear their websites to work perfectly fine on Firefox. This is why you see common web apps like Microsoft Teams having several performance issues and bugs that are exclusive to Firefox. And that alone can be a growing problem into the future, and when it comes to the development of Firefox, they're going to have to focus around Chromium, making sure that all the websites that work perfectly fine on Chromium will also work on Firefox, as that becomes less of a priority for web developers. So overall, I hope Mozilla can get a little bit more creative in some of the ways that they can make money so they can grow and thrive as a company and be a little less dependent on other sources of revenue. And then with that, it's our job as people who love and use free and open source software on a daily basis to not completely default to being critical of every single way Mozilla tries to make money. For example, one thing that was kind of silly was the huge community backlash when they decided to start accepting cryptocurrencies as donations. Now, I'm not a huge fan of cryptocurrencies. I have a little bit here and there. I don't really talk about it on the channel. It's not something I'm interested in or necessarily care about. If it flopped tomorrow, wouldn't care. If it blew up tomorrow, I wouldn't care. But people were so mad that they were trying to do this, it just didn't make sense. I understand it's not good for the environment, but it's a way for them to make money, and if we want them to be able to kind of distance themselves from their current contracts, well, you gotta be open to things like that. There's a lot of people who use cryptocurrencies. You can exchange it for money, and that would have been a way to make money. They're still accepting a proof of stake cryptocurrencies, but not proof of work because of energy efficiency issues, which again, I understand, but just the more options, the better when it comes to funding projects like this. For more information about this, I do recommend you check out Nick's video. That covers kind of the same topic about why Firefox is essential to the future of the open web, but the TLDR of that video is Google has too much control over the internet, and Safari has been rather stagnant when it comes to web standards, causing it to be kind of the new Internet Explorer. And Firefox is our last hope. But honestly, Safari's kind of nice. I've been using it on the little MacBook back there, and it's a good experience. I can't lie to you. With that, if you want to look more into this, I'm going to be linking down below to various articles on some things I didn't cover in this video, and that video by Nick. So with that, I do hope you have an absolutely beautiful day, and goodbye.